Matthew wrote his gospel to show the Jews of first century Palestine that God had kept his ancient promises to Israel through the life, death and resurrection of Jesus. The genealogy at the beginning of the gospel, in which we have encountered a few of God's grannies over the past few weeks, is there to demonstrate Jesus' direct descendants as a son of Abraham, Israel's founding patriarch, and a son of David, Israel's most famous king, and therefore proving him to be the Messiah. But I find it interesting that what he's proving is a patriarchal line, the last of whom, we are told in verse 16, is Jacob, the father of Joseph, husband of Mary, and Mary is the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. And as we have just heard, Joseph is not technically the father of Jesus. So we might ask what the genealogy is really about, and does it matter? Because hidden in that genealogy is the divinity of Christ. We are told that Mary became pregnant by the Holy Spirit, and in Jewish culture, you inherit your Jewishness from your mother. It comes through the matriarchal line. And in saying yes to God, a whole new line was created through Mary, a new covenant where human and divine are joined together in the baby Jesus. I wonder if Mary even realised how powerful that was, or whether her yes came from a place of simple faith or even naivety. It is hard to know for sure because we don't have her account of what happened. Nevertheless, throughout history, Mary has been revered and honoured and quite possibly distorted to fit the image that most suited the church as pure, holy and virginal. So would the real Mary please stand up? The account in Matthew's Gospel refers to Mary only by reference to Joseph. She's practically a bystander in her own story. So let's hear what St. Luke had to say.
In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favoured. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favour with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of the father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin?" The angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One is to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who is said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail." "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word to me be fulfilled." Then the angel left her.
Ah, that's more like it. Enter the angel Gabriel and a more familiar Christmas story of stars, donkeys, shepherds, no room at the inn, mangers and wise men with gold and frankincense and myrrh, angels and dreams and escape to Egypt. Interestingly, Luke's Gospel is written for the Gentiles, which technically is you and me. So maybe that's why we identify with this story more. Or is it that out of this story has come a romanticised version, or almost fairy tale, of both Mary and Christmas? Now don't get me wrong, you all know how much I love fairy tales and angels, especially when they point to the truth. But for generations they've been manipulated in art and song to hide the truth of the Christmas story, perhaps because the truth is too uncomfortable to consider. What we know is that Mary lived in first century Palestine. She came from Galilee, and we are told she was a virgin pledged to Joseph. At this time in history, Palestinian women were among the poorest in the world. This was due in no small part to Roman agricultural practices that divested Israelites, particularly Galileans, of their ancestral lands and increasingly impoverished the population. Any of this, so it sounds very much like a twist on 21st century Palestine. So we know for certain that Mary was poor. It is more than likely that she was illiterate and would have had no schooling, which is not to say that she was stupid, but she would have been very young. Cultural practices of that time meant that young girls were betrothed around the age of 12 and considered ready for marriage once they had begun to menstruate, usually by the age of 14. Essentially, Mary was, by today's standards, a child bride, and that makes me pretty uncomfortable. My granddaughter is 12. It makes me uncomfortable because junior school children innocently reenact the truth year after year in the nativity play. The girl chosen to be Mary is nearer to the real age of Mary than is otherwise generally portrayed in art and icons. It is interesting that UNICEF says that marriage before the age of 18 is a fundamental violation of human rights. It also states that many factors interact to place a girl at risk of marriage, including poverty, the perception that marriage will provide protection, family honour, social norms, customary or religious laws that condone the practice. Child marriage often compromises a girl's development by resulting in early pregnancy and social isolation, interrupting her schooling, limiting her opportunities for career and vocational advancement, and placing her at increased risk of domestic violence. Child marriage also affects boys, but to a lesser degree than girls. How happy does Christmas feel now? In our world today, approximately 15 million girls a year between the ages of 9 and 18 are married. Many of those are mothers, and most of them are poor and uneducated. Which takes us back to Galilee and a girl who has been visited by the angel Gabriel, a girl who has said yes to God. Just to put that in context, it would be a little like if Scarlett had said yes to God. What might we guess about Mary's character? For she says yes, despite the fact that saying it will almost certainly lead to disgrace and being an outcast. And she will know this. But she says yes. Why? Why on earth would a young woman say yes when the cost and the consequence is so high? She had a choice. She could have said no. We cannot even begin to guess how the visitation from the angel impacted her. But in these gospel stories, 3 people say yes to the angel Gabriel: Elizabeth, Mary, and Joseph. For each of them, there is a stigma to be borne from yes. Elizabeth is a geriatric mum. Joseph quietly bears the shame of a wife pregnant not by him, and Mary being pregnant by someone other than her husband. And yet they all do it willingly. So here we are on the first Sunday of Advent in the time of expectant waiting and preparation for celebration of Jesus' birth. And it's also a time of expectant waiting for the return of Jesus at the second coming. So for a few moments in silence, I invite you to consider, if the angel Gabriel was standing here this morning, what would you be prepared to say yes to?